Alright guys, so the last video that I filmed was, and that will be going up soon, and actually will be up by the time you see this, is a video about magic within paganism. And I get a little off track at times and stuff, but the whole point and moral of the story is that basically life is magic, and really that's all you really need. Yes, there are spells, yes, there are certain rituals and ceremonies you can do and stuff, but you don't need them really. They're just there to help you focus to do certain spells. I'm not going to talk about magic anymore because it's just going to overcomplicate the subject, but at the end of that particular video, that's why I ended it when I did, at the end of that video I started to talk about, well, paganism. There's a possibility that people are going to start creating, or the future of paganism basically is what I'm talking about, a pagan Bible. And really this is what this video is about. My fears, because I do fear it, my fears and my thoughts and my opinions on the future for paganism, and how I would like it to go, but how it may possibly go, and the consequences of it going in a particular direction. Using historical references actually to show you what happens when you put a religion in a book. It's never a good thing to do. Now obviously scholars exist, okay, and paganism has been studied by scholars, and they've presented their scholarly articles on paganism, and they've done so, but they've never once said that these are the teachings of paganism as such. They've just said, I've studied this, I found this out about Humbler and all that, for example in cosmology and Ask and Embla, and this is what I've presented, this is the evidence that I've shown, that this is obviously what pagans believed within Nordic paganism about cosmology, and the reasons is because I found this tome, and I found this monolith with runes chiseled into it, so on and so forth. Those kind of things, they're not bad, okay? Now obviously the scholars themselves probably aren't pagan, okay, and so what they present, the information they present, they don't think of the consequences of what they have found will have on people like me who is pagan, okay. And this actually comes from a discussion that we had, a live discussion with Celtic God, between myself, Celtic God, and I think it was Alvar the Heartless. All three of us had a major discussion, and there was a couple of other people who were just commenting in the chat section. We had a discussion, and please check out that video, by the way. It's the first live video that Celtic God has done, and we talk about this quite early on as a subject. It obviously showed really the importance of what we feel about paganism and the future of paganism. But we were talking about how scholars are necessary. We don't begrudge the scholars studying our religion, because sometimes they find stuff that we would never find, and they discover evidence or stories or insights to a religion that is our religion that we would never have found without them. So I have no problem with scholars looking at the religion. The problem is when pagans, young pagans who don't have access to people like myself, Celtic God, and so on and so forth, who are eager to learn, find those scholarly articles and take them as word, okay, that this is the way it is. But they don't understand, because paganism is, and always has been and should always be, a religion that is taught through or oration. Okay, oration is talking. Okay, it's more than talking. Oration is where I'm not preaching to you. I'm not telling you this is the way that you must practice your religion. There's this God, he did this, and that's it. And there's no discussion. Paganism is all about discussion. I tell you a story. I tell you my story, the story that I heard, or the story that I was taught about how, I don't know, Odin hung himself for 9 days and 9 nights to gain wisdom and to gain the sight of runes, the rune sight. He essentially sacrificed himself to gain power. I could tell you that story, or I could tell you the story of Tyr when he put his hand in Fenrir's mouth and the consequences of that and why he did it, and it's how that proves that he was predominantly the god of courage rather than the god of justice or god of nobility or whatever, or anything like those lines, or god of war. He was the god of courage first and foremost. That's my opinion. You may disagree with me and say that no, Tyr's the god of justice, or Odin, no, he hung himself for 9 days but not 9 nights, it was only 8 nights, or whatever. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Pagans, this is the thing, pagans, we don't care about the details of the stories that we tell. There's differences between one group of pagan and another group of pagan, okay? And these differences exist for obvious reasons. Paganism is a very old religion. It could be 30, 40,000 years old, could be older, but it's at least 10,000 years old because it existed in the Ice Age, and the Ice Age ended 10,000 years ago, so we know it's over 10,000 years old. Over that time, obviously, as people spread out, geographically speaking, and start populating the world that is around them, which obviously for the pagans became Western Europe, they're going to form their own ideas, their own belief structures, but using paganism, or the proto-paganism that existed in the Ice Age, as its core, okay? And the little stories that are attached to that, they differ. I mean, they can differ quite greatly also. For example, Nordic paganism sees Odin as the king of all the gods, or certainly the king of the Aesir and the Vanir. He's not the king of the giants, but he's the king of the Aesir and the Vanir. Okay, whereas in Celtic mythology, it's Tyr. Tyr has a very minor role in Nordic paganism. He's not really mentioned that much. He only has one role, and that's to bind Fenrir and then fight in Ragnarok like everyone else. So he takes a much lesser role within Nordic paganism. But the fact that happens, Celts don't take insult from that just because we've lowered the status of what is essentially their king of the gods. And we have a different king of the gods. In the same way that we don't care that they look at Woden as something else other than what we look at. We don't care about the differences. In fact, we become interested in the differences. Basically, I'll tell you a story, and you tell me your story, and we'll discuss the differences. We'll try and work out, well, the moral behind my story is this, and the moral behind the same story, but the way that you told it is this. The morals could be completely different. Most of the time, they're the same morals of the story, essentially, such as courage or whatever. But courage through self-sacrifice and stuff like this. But actually, the morals could be completely different. It doesn't matter. The morals, the story, the way you tell it, it does not matter. Even though it may be the same particular subject matter within the religion, it could be completely different. As long as the morals of the story that you tell are 100% valuable, they teach you a life lesson, or they give you insight into life, or into your religion of paganism through one form or another, then who cares? The story's done its job. And now you've got a second story. You can say, well, there's two ways that this story happened. My belief is this, but I've also heard this. It's like gossip, almost. We don't really know what the gods are doing and have done. Obviously, we have insight, but really, we're just gossiping about the gods. That's our religion. It's gossiping about the gods. It's talking about them and venerating them through simply admiring or talking about them and analysing and saying, well, okay, yeah, this and this. And sometimes, you'll tell a story or you give a story and you won't even believe that happened. The Slipnir, for example, the steed of Odin, have 8 legs. No, probably not. So it sounds more like a spider in that case. I don't believe that, but some people might, and I respect if they do. If they want to take it fundamentally and very literally, then that's fantastic. It's great. I ain't bothered. Why? Because they're still pagan. They're still hearing the same stories that I do, and their belief in it. Well, it's their way. It's their choice to believe in the religion in the way that they believe it. And the reason there's such variety in the way that we believe and see things is because paganism is taught, as I say, through oration. And that is, as I say, it's not simply preaching or talking, it's a discussion. And I've done a video on that in detail. So please watch it if you want further expansion upon what oration is. And really, modern day tools and technology now allow pagans across the world to do this. This is why I'm on here doing paganistic videos. It's why Celtic God is on here, Sacred Equinox, so on and so forth. It's why we're all on here, because we're teaching you paganism through video format, which then you can then communicate back to us on, either if it's a live chat directly, either via the chat or by being invited to discuss a particular topic. But it also allows you to comment in the sections below, and then we'll answer your questions. We'll talk to you and we'll go, okay, there's this and this. Okay, you believe this, I believe that. Okay, cool. But really, as I say, paganism it doesn't matter. The differences between the denominations of paganism that exist for a good reason, as I say, I hinted at it earlier, that the reasons there are denominations or differences in paganist views and beliefs is partly because, obviously, we talk about our religion. We teach our religion through speech, through discussion. And that's obviously going to create variety, even in a small locality. But as I say, the religion is so old that when it's spread, it's had a lot of time to evolve. And in certain localities, it's evolved differently. For example, in Scandinavia, the Nords, the Vikings, essentially, created Nordic paganism. Now, it's still paganism, but it's one that suited their mindset of going on raids and raping and killing and pillaging and stuff. Because I'm not trying to say that pagans are peaceful people. In the past, they were as aggressive and as warlike as the people around them, because the whole world was very, very barbaric back then. Back when paganism was at its peak, the world was barbaric. It was warlike. People killed people, and over silly little things sometimes. And pagans were no different. But there's one very important difference: pagans never killed over religion. As I say, as you look at the localities, like Scandinavia had Nordic paganism, mainland Europe would be Celtic paganism, Britain would have its own variation of Celtic paganism, which I would call Britannic paganism. I know it's probably not an official term, but they had their own sort of variation of it all. Ireland may have had its own variation. Then there's Iberian paganism, for example. And there are others as well, like Baltic, I think, paganism and Slavic paganism. I can't remember them all now, but there's a lot of paganism out there, different types of paganism. Just like in Christianity, for example, there's the two main branches, Catholicism and Protestantism, and within the Protestants, you've got a huge variation. You've got Methodists, you've got Presbyterians. You've got evangelicists, just to name a few, okay? And there'll be probably hundreds of different types of Christian. So it's natural for a religion, is what I'm trying to say, is to have difference. It's natural to have difference. And it's probably a good thing to have difference in a religion. But here's the difference. Christianity, and I'm going to pick on Christianity, not because I've got a problem with Christianity. I've got no problem whatsoever. I live in a Christian country. These days, it's a very peaceful religion. It's a good religion in many respects. It teaches good morals and ethics, in my personal opinion. I'm not Christian. I don't believe in a singular God. I don't believe in Jesus as being the son of that God or anything along those lines. But I can respect the religion at the very least. It's not like I'm trying to say that everyone should be pagan, because no, not everyone should be pagan. Everyone should be what they want to be. But those who want to be pagan should be allowed to be pagan. But what I'm trying to say is we need to be truthful about how having a holy text, a book, a singular book, can cause issue. Now, this now leads into the fears and our thoughts on what the future of paganism may very well be for ourselves. Celtic God and Alvar and that, they've heard that there may be people who are trying to create what's called a pagan Bible, or the pagan Bible, which is even scarier. The pagan Bible. We as pagans do not like it. As I've gone on, for 15 minutes I've gone on about how we teach our religion vocally. Okay, we've never written down our religion. Very rarely have we written down our religion. We may have done it as poems, as eddas and stuff like that, but we've never written, you must do this, you must do that. We don't have commandments as such, and we simply teach our way of how to live through our stories, essentially, and through our belief system in that sense. But there are no set rules. It's for us to understand through the stories how to live our life. Really, you need, strength, courage, hang on, let me just get my notebook. I made some notes on it all yesterday, and my memory's starting to play up, but I don't know if I have it here. Let's have a look. But ultimately, from the religion, you should hopefully take away the fact that whatever it is, however you live your life, you should have strength, courage, and wisdom. And when you have all three of them, you suddenly have honour. And that's really how a pagan should live. A pagan should live their life with honour. It's not about being nice and kind and love thy neighbour and all the rest of it. You can be nice, okay? That comes in wisdom. Being nice to people around you, that's wise. More often than not, as long as they pose no threat to you, pose no threat to them. And from all this, from those three things, as I say, you gain honour. Strength, courage, and wisdom equals honour when combined together. And that's all we really need to take from our religion. If you take nothing else from the teaching of paganism, you must take that. And if you go out and live an honourable life as a pagan, you have succeeded. And it's hard. It's hard to have all that in your life. You need to work at it. Just like with Christians, for example, they like to have charity, they like to love their neighbour, they love to forgive people, so on and so forth. Not for us, but it's good for them, okay? But the problem is, because they have a singular text with commandments, they have a singular text with all the stories written down, word for word, how they should be taught, so on and so forth, they gain a fundamental text. Even though Christianity nowadays is not a fundamental religion, it has been in the past, but they have a text that is very fundamental in nature. Do this, do that, that's it. If you don't do it, you're going to hell. You're a bad Christian, okay? It's a rule book, essentially. It's not a religious text, but it becomes a rule book. Yes, okay, yes, you can read the stories and interpret them yourself. Discuss it with your priests and Sunday school and all that. But everyone knows that priests and all the rest of it tend to be fairly dogmatic. If not today, they certainly were in the past. And we know this because, of course, the Vatican, for example, the head of Catholicus, the Catholic faith, or the Catholic element of Christianity, because my belief is that it's just the Christian faith, and then you got all these lots of little people that like to think that they know Christianity better than the other people within the same religion. It doesn't matter. You're still Christian. You should embrace one another as brothers, Okay, but they don't, or they haven't, certainly at the very least in history, because the Vatican has actually got rid of certain denominations of their own church by branding them as heretics and having them burnt or killed by inquisitors who used to serve, obviously, the Catholic Church. You then have not just that, not just the Pope and the Vatican and everything. You've also got in Britain, for example. I know a lot more about British history than I know about European history. You look at Bloody Mary, Mary the First of England, Queen Mary the First of England, who was the daughter of King Henry VIII, who had the 6 wives. Everyone knows him. He had an oldest daughter, and she was the daughter of him and his legitimate marriage to Catherine of Aragon. She was Catholic. Now, Henry VIII? Henry VIII? Yeah, Henry VIII. Sorry, I was making sure it wasn't Henry VI. Henry VIII, he was Protestant. He started off Catholic, but he became Protestant, and he created Protestantism within England, so that he could, basically, he didn't want to bow down to a pope. He didn't want to follow his rules anymore. He was like, no, we'll have Christianity. I'm Christian, but we're going to live Christianity in our own way. And for that, England was basically excommunicated. And that's where the Spanish Armada came. That's why we were invaded by Spain. They didn't get anywhere. We didn't even lose a single ship when we sunk all their ships. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is we were invaded. We were prime target when we were excommunicated, essentially, for doing this. But Mary, when she became queen, Mary was Catholic, and she decided that if you're not Catholic, you're not worth anything. And so she went around and got all the known Protestants and burnt them at the stake. Then, of course, Queen Elizabeth I came on. She was Protestant, like her father, and she didn't actually do the same. She didn't go around burning Catholics. I'm sure she burnt a few, but she, only just the worst of them. But from what I've heard, she didn't actually burn any Catholics. But what I'm trying to say is, at that point, you got people burning Christians, burning other Christians, because they're a different type of Christian. Now, in paganism, that never occurred. Pagans never once invaded other pagans because of religious differences. Don't get me wrong, as I say, pagans were not the nicest of people. They were as nasty and as violent as the other people who lived around them. The Christians of the time, the Romans, the Carthaginians, I believe that's how it's pronounced, people from Carthage, okay, the Egyptians. They were all horrible fucking people. The mass majority of them. No. Maybe not the mass majority of them, but they were violent. That's what I really mean. It was a violent world filled with violent people. And, the pagans were no different. Okay? But, and I will say, but, they never hurt another pagan simply because they saw paganism in a slightly different way to them. There were many, many denominations of paganism, and there still are, to some extent. There are a lot of different ways of looking at paganism, and every single one of those different types of pagan would never hurt another pagan just because they saw paganism in a different way. In fact, they go, oh, this is my story about paganism. My story about Odin, for example, when he hung himself for 9 days and 9 nights. Do you have the same story? No. Okay, well, how did it happen in your belief? Okay. Well, let's discuss the differences. So as long as the story had value, and by that what I mean is the moral behind the story had value, it didn't really matter. The story had worth, it had value, because the morals behind it had value. Okay, and through that sharing of those differences in story just happened because of geographical differences, as I say, and language differences, and the fact that religion was very, very old. Scandinavia valued a martial, very, very martial sort of lifestyle to life, and they raided through naval invasions, essentially. And so they had gods like Ran, for example, who may not, goddesses like Ran and Aegir, for example, who may not have existed in Celtic paganism, because Celtic paganism was essentially mainland Europe and didn't have a lot of sea. so they didn't really fight on the sea that often. Instead, they may have, had, I know, like botanic paganism, for example, had the green man within their religion, and that was because England was covered in forests, and so the green man is the god of the forests. From what I know, he doesn't exist in any of the other denominations, but it doesn't matter that there's those slight differences. It just shows you that differences existed for a reason. Okay, it showed you what the cultures that believed in those religions, they just valued certain things over other things more. For example, as I say, Nordic pagans believed Odin as the Allfather, as the god and the king of the gods. And he was famous for his wisdom. He was the god of wisdom, essentially. And so they favoured wisdom and the defeating of your opponent, no matter... Basically, the ends justify the means. Odin would fight any opponent, and he would bend the rules. He would cheat. He would lie. He didn't care, as long as he won. Okay? Whereas Celtic paganism, for example, Tyr was the king of the gods. Okay? Now, that's a major difference. The king of the gods being different between denominations, but it didn't matter. It just represented that Tyr was a king of more nobility and justice and self-sacrifice, and obviously this strength or this courage was something that Celtic pagans valued more than just simply victory at all costs. Okay, maybe because they just weren't at war as much as the Vikings were. The Vikings used to be at war, well, not war, but conflict with other nations or other groups a lot more than other denominations of of paganism. And so this is why the differences exist. Now, if you go and take and create a pagan Bible, this is worrisome, and this is what me and the other pagans here on YouTube fear, that they will create a pagan Bible, which in the short term would be good, because it will make paganism more accessible. It will allow people to become pagan. They just buy the book, they read it, they learn the stories, they'll see the teachings, they can take their own interpretations and go, okay, that's good, I like that, I'll become pagan. And so we'll have a lot more pagans around. But the problem is, once you've created a book and it's seen as the book, like the Bible is for Christianity or the Quran for Islam or whatever, once you create the book, over time, not now, obviously people wouldn't take the book too seriously these days, but in 500 years' time, say the book is still around, all of a sudden that text has become holy. It's become reverent in its own way. You can't argue with the book now. It's become fundamental. It's become fundamental in teaching a large portion of the pagans out there who haven't learned paganism through traditional means, that is, through oration, as I said, through discussion. They learnt it from a book, and in that book you can't argue with it. When it says this is the way it happened, this is the way, what it means, this is how you should live your life, so on and so forth, whatever it's trying to say, eventually what those people do is they take that book and they go, well, this is what the book says. And that's when paganism becomes like all the other religions. It becomes single-minded. It doesn't become open-minded, it becomes closed-minded. Okay? And it can cause issues. Okay? Because this is how Christianity, for example, despite being at its core, if you read the Bible, it's very, very peaceful in the mass majority of it. The Old Testament isn't, but that's a whole different thing. But the New Testament, which defines Christianity, is actually a very peaceful book. How you could corrupt that book just shows you how corrupt certain men are. But they take that book and they corrupt it and they turn it into violence, into the burning of witches, which was the burning of pagans, essentially. They tried to wipe paganism out of Europe because they saw paganism as a threat. Okay, because it wasn't Christian, they didn't understand it. They saw it as Satanism. and so they burnt people who they believed were Satanists. They were probably just pagan. They burnt a few of their own people as well, but they burnt a lot of pagans as well. And so they did it all in the name of this book, because the book told you this is how you live your life, and everyone else who doesn't live your life this way, if you're a bit sick in the head, you can think, well, they're wrong and they must be punished for it. And we don't want the same thing for paganism. I'm not saying that pagans will go out there and start killing Christians because or Islamists or anything like this, or Hindus or Sikhs or whatever, just because they've got a book in 500 years' time that's telling them this is the way you live your life. But it will segregate them, and it will segregate, and it will segregate. It will cause the religion to no longer develop, to no longer be questioned. It will become stagnant. It will become just the book. Whereas if the religion continues as it is, as an organic structure where people talk and discuss the stories, you're normally around a campfire, but now through video footage. We live in an age where technology allows us to do this again, just like in the old days, but at far greater distance. I can talk to Americans, I can talk to Europeans, and I can do it instantly, as if they're in the same room as me, and I can discuss with them their ideas on paganism, and I can learn from them, but they can also learn from me. And so we develop and continue the paganism and belief in paganism in the way that it should, and has always been, and should always continue to be taught. Without this, as I say, if they do simplify it into a book, I will be afraid, because I believe it will be the death of paganism. True paganism. It will be... The problem is, when you've got a book and it's written by someone, you have one interpretation. When they take the book, they'll go, right, I'm taking the Nordic point of view. And so then all the knowledge from Celtic paganism, Iberian paganism, Britannic paganism, whatever, Baltic stuff, whatever, all the different denominations will then be excluded. They'll teach Nordic paganism. Or, if they teach Celtic paganism, they'll throw away all the stuff about Odin, which of course exists only within Nordic paganism. They'll throw away everything that exists in Iberian paganism that's different to Celtic paganism, and so on and so forth. You may lose knowledge of the Green Man, like I say, within Britannic or British paganism. This is the problem about having one book, because it will only have one viewpoint. One singular viewpoint. They can't put everything into it and go, well, some people believe this, some people believe that. No, they can't. They'll have one viewpoint, and they'll lose a wealth of information. We'll lose so much information, so much knowledge will be lost that is currently available. And we've lost so much knowledge anyway, we can't afford to lose more knowledge. We need the knowledge that we have to be spread through means like this, through videos,